Almost nobody believes the worst things online are real. They think the dark web is a ghost story, a cautionary paragraph in a tech article. The truth is messier and a lot darker. Behind layers of routing and logs that look like noise, entire economies, crimes, and communities formed with rules nobody outside could see. Today, we are going to pull one thread and follow it through servers, private chats, until we see the damage it left behind. We will show you how seemingly small technical oversights became chains of real-world consequences, who profited, who lied, and who paid the price. Our reporting is based on document dumps, interviews with investigators, blockchain traces, and testimony from people who lived inside these spaces. This story contains graphic testimony and legal details that may be upsetting. If you are here for the investigation, stay with me. If not, consider skipping. If you find this reporting valuable, like and subscribe to support more work like this. Now, let us begin with the account that started it all. A market that promised absolute anonymity but built its business on human desperation. The origin of the case begins in late 2014 with a marketplace that called itself Atlas Exchange. Its landing page was austere. A small logo, an invitation-only sign-up, and a short manifesto about free trade and privacy. The founder, who used the handle Architect Atlas, was a 28-year-old former systems administrator from Eastern Europe named Marek Holden. Marek was not a caricature of a villain. He had been a scholarship student in Prague, brilliant at network optimization, and frustrated by perceived censorship on commercial platforms. He wrote code to route traffic through nested relays and to obfuscate server fingerprints. Atlas launched as a purportedly ethical market for banned books and controversial journalism. Within months, it had listings that varied from vintage political pamphlets to illegal goods and services. The site accepted multiple cryptocurrencies, favored Monero for higher value transactions, and encouraged users to encrypt messages with PGP keys. Its architecture mixed Tor-hidden services with ephemeral VPS nodes and a distributed escrow system that rearranged funds in pools for each transaction to reduce traceability. At surface level, Atlas was technical elegance. Under the hood, it was chaotic. Administrators tolerated vendors who sold fake IDs, stolen credit card data, and unlicensed prescription drugs. Moderation was ad hoc. Decisions were announced in private channels and enforced by a small cadre of moderators who boasted of a libertarian code. The first documented crime tied to Atlas occurred in 2015 when a credit card cluster sold within a vendor category was used to withdraw funds across 3 countries. Bank fraud investigators found clusters of chargebacks traced to a dozen small businesses. That first flag triggered a slow bleed. Users demanded more extreme goods. Vendors evolved. In one chat log we obtained, a vendor wrote, "We started with copies. Now buyers ask for certainty." The site reacted by adding a vendor rating system and escrow rules that, on paper, looked like consumer protection. In reality, those features only streamline transactions. Soon, Atlas hosted a marketplace of services and content that prosecutors would later describe in court as an organized criminal platform. We interviewed a former moderator, Jenna Morales, who told us she joined because she believed in privacy as a principle. Jenna described a feeling of gradual moral corrosion. At first, she filtered hate speech and DDoS sellers. Then a vendor posted a how-to for bypassing home surveillance. She reported it, nothing happened, and she was told the vendor had too many sales to suspend. That moment shifted the site from ambiguous to dangerous for her. The evidence against Atlas accumulated in unexpected ways. A submission to a moderator included images and a GPS-tagged photo. A sloppy vendor used an online photo service that left EXIF metadata intact. A separate vendor reused a PGP key across different forums, allowing investigators to link identities by correlation. By 2017, law enforcement in 3 jurisdictions had open investigations. The FBI would later describe Atlas as a central node in transnational fraud rings. For Marek, the founder, the story became a battle between ideology and hubris. He told a private interviewer he believed marketplaces should not be governed by national laws and that the state was overreaching. He also admitted, in a message recovered during warrants, that the temptation of fees had outpaced his capacity to supervise every vendor. The technical operation of Atlas used three elements common to many illicit platforms. First, layered anonymization through Tor and additional onion relays, which created a public set of hidden addresses and a private set that rotated every 24 hours. Second, an escrow mechanism that held buyer funds until both parties confirmed delivery. That escrow used smart contract-style logic off-chain, but the implementation was proprietary and poorly documented. Third, a web of mirror sites and invitation-based communities that made takedown complex. When a mirror disappeared, administrators triggered an automated demarc and a canary statement, which paradoxically signaled continuity rather than vulnerability. We showed these mechanics to a blockchain analyst, Malik Chen, who mapped payment flows and found that a significant share of vendor payouts cycled through high-risk mixing services before reaching personal wallets. Malik explained that mixing services add plausible deniability but also create traceable patterns when used habitually. In a forensic report he prepared for a U.S. attorney, Malik calculated that roughly 32% of outgoing funds from Atlas-linked wallets eventually touched an exchange that cooperated with subpoenas. That statistical link gave investigators their first legal leverage. The site had flaws that were less technical and more human: a small admin team, a culture that rewarded growth over compliance, and a community that celebrated evasion. When law enforcement prepared to act, it targeted those soft spots first. Atlas changed around 2016 when several high-profile vendors were arrested. The administrators introduced stricter verification and a new market module called TrustBind that required multi-sig for large transactions. That module was touted as a safety upgrade. In practice, TrustBind created a two-tier economy. Small, risk-friendly purchases continued under old escrow rules, while large transactions required additional verification, either through third-party certifiers or through invite-only vendor clubs. We interviewed Thomas Gruber, a whistleblower who had been a vendor for Vintage Electronics and later reported activity using his vendor account. He described an evolution where the marketplace split into factions: conservative moderators who wanted to close criminal listings, and a libertarian faction who insisted that code defined acceptable transactions, not moderators. The split produced an exodus of some users, but those who stayed became more insular and technically sophisticated. Administrators added ephemeral message channels and more aggressive encryption requirements, but they never rebuilt governance. Community reaction to takedown rumors varied. Some users offered to move the market to a decentralized platform. Others threatened to leak user lists to rivals. A steady drumbeat of public chat logs showed users prioritizing survival over ethics. Interviews with experts suggested that this was a predictable life cycle when markets lack accountability and have financial incentives to tolerate criminal activity. At approximately one-third of this investigation, we paused to ask you a question. What surprised you most? The audacity of the founder, the failures of the moderators, or the way payment rails betrayed users? Tell us in the comments, starting with "What shocked me," so we can highlight replies in our follow-up. Your responses help guide where we dig next and often bring us tips we could not otherwise find. We read them all. Our second case pivots from a marketplace to a community where harm moved from financial theft to personal violence. In late 2016, a forum called Red Orchard began as a grief support board for people who felt alienated from mainstream sites. It had moderators who were peers rather than professionals and a design that emphasized threads open for days. Over 2 years, Red Orchard became a site where harassment escalated into coordinated campaigns to identify and target individuals for public shaming. The architecture was less sophisticated than Atlas. It was a ClearNet forum hosted on rented servers, using pseudo-anonymity rather than Tor, but it functioned as an incubator for collective aggression. The community curated content, upvoted attacks, and deployed doxing as a ritual. One user, known as Fallow, compiled dossiers on dozens of targets,
posting personal details, social media links, and alleged infractions. What began as calls for accountability evolved into a pattern where at least 3 users faced threats, job losses, and 1 attempted assault. The moderators, including Hannah Park and Nora Finch, were overwhelmed. Hannah had joined to offer support to survivors and had a backstory that explains why she stayed too long. She was a 29-year-old social worker who had lost a sibling to online harassment. Hannah believed that exposing abusers would prevent harm. Her backstory, as she later told investigators, included early activism, a stint in nonprofit crisis intervention, and a moment when she herself posted a victim's name in anger. That post never should have been public. The consequences were immediate: a canceled speaking engagement and a private legal notice. Hannah stayed because she felt guilt and responsibility. Nora Finch, an ex-admin, had a different past. Nora was a former journalist who turned to community moderation after newsrooms cut staff. She sought meaningful engagement and joined Red Orchard as a volunteer. Over time, she faced harassment from within and left when the community rewarded doxing. The dynamic created a tragic irony. People who wanted to help became instruments of harm. The legal aftermath included civil suits and a criminal investigation that resulted in a restraining order for one identified member, Leo Alvarez, who had escalated threats into stalking. Leo was named by a targeted user, and evidence linked his IP to harassment messages. He argued in court that he never intended physical harm, but a jury found his pattern of threats credible and awarded damages. We recorded a tense exchange between Hannah, a moderator, and a user whose doxings had sparked real-world fallout. The dialogue went like this. "You have to take that thread down," Hannah said. "We cannot allow names," the user replied. "They deserve exposure." "Exposure is not our job," Hannah replied. "We are supposed to protect people." The user countered. "We are the community. We decide." Hannah answered, "And who cares when someone loses a job?" The user paused. "That is part of accountability." "Then you must accept responsibility," Hannah said. The conversation did not end with resolution. Other moderators chimed in. Nora wrote, "We are burned out." A quiet member posted, "I left the board last week. It felt wrong." The exchange lasted for hours over multiple threads, and its aftermath was a moderation log showing repeated failures to enforce policy. Sensory details return in these moments: the dry hum of servers, the clinical glow of monitors as moderators read anxious messages at 2 a.m., the metallic buzz of notification sounds when a threat was posted, and the hollow feeling of guilt that lingers after an irreversible action. Those are the textures of online harm. One of the most disturbing transitions came when Red Orchard users connected with Atlas vendors. A vendor offered doxing for hire services and even gave a parcel refund code to a member who provided high-value targets. The service operated like any other marketplace listing, with reviews and a delivery window. The result was immediate: a coordinated campaign that combined doxing, a smear site, and physical intimidation. Investigators documented the payment flow. The purchase, small and obscured by payment tokens, became the lever for coordinated offline harassment. Law enforcement used subpoenas to map transactions and succeeded in identifying several buyers. The court record includes a transcript where an Atlas vendor, confronted with evidence, refused to accept responsibility and claimed plausible deniability. "I was a seller of data. What the buyer did with it was not my contract." A prosecutor responded, "The contract included targeting and instructions." That exchange became pivotal in a prosecution that argued marketplace sellers knew the likely outcome of their services. We shift to a third case that combined fraud with violence and resulted in a homicide investigation. In 2018, an employment board called WorkLink promised secretive contracting managers who would place high-confidence contractors for cash. The site was a simple job board on a mirror domain, used primarily by people seeking cash work outside verification. An operator named Raven posted a vetting service that offered to run background checks and provide a curated list of local contractors. The checks used leaked databases and forged documents. One client, a mid-level manager named Ethan Cole, hired a contractor who turned out to be an imposter, and later, the contractor became linked to an attempted robbery at a property Ethan managed. The robbery escalated into a confrontation and, tragically, a fatality. The criminal investigation traced the contractor back through a chain of alias emails, burner phones, and purchases made on WorkLink. The key evidence was a message thread where Raven offered an additional service. If you need guarantees, pay extra and we will screen names. That message became a smoking gun when it was matched to financial records. The family of the deceased sued the manager for negligent hiring, and the case exposed how markets for trust facilitate criminal outsourcing. The courtroom scenes were raw. In one exchange, the victim's sister, Dr. Aisha Khan, testified about the phone call she received at 2 in the morning and described the sound of sirens, a wet street, and the metallic scent in the air when she arrived. Her testimony included a line many jurors later cited. "We trusted a name because it was listed as vetted." The judge later referenced that in sentencing. Throughout these cases, we encountered forums and boards that acted as accelerants for radicalization. A network we call the Archive Boards began as a niche discussion forum about political theory. Over time, a subgroup called the Purview emerged. The Purview used academic language to justify violent fantasies, then normalized language of dehumanization and created action threads where theory slid into planning. We tracked event threads where members organized meetups that devolved into harassment campaigns at civic events. The board's administrators were indifferent, often citing free speech and claiming removal would be censorship. Their argument sounded like a philosophical debate, but the effect on newcomers was tactical. Repeated exposure to radical rhetoric and the presence of echo chambers where dissent was bullied out. We spoke with a de-radicalization specialist, Dr. Marcus Levy, who described the process in blunt terms. He said that boards like Purview combine social identity with a narrative of grievance. That combination can convert online outrage into offline harm when there are triggers like a political rally or a viral allegation. Sensory description in this part of the story matters. The sterile glow of a live stream camera at a rally, the cold press of a printed flyer left at a bus stop, the abrupt silence that falls when a plan is revealed. Some members realized the line between talk and action has been crossed. We identified 3 distinct moments of escalation where moderators had plausible moments to act and did not. Each moment involved a short sequence of messages, repeated endorsements, and a failure to consult external experts. Those technical and human failures created predictable pathways to harm. There are technical processes that kept enabling these patterns. One such process is wallet mixing and the laundering of crypto payments. In simple terms, mixing pools combine many small payments and then redistribute funds in new combinations to obscure original paths. That is a high-level definition. What matters for investigations is pattern recognition. Habitual use of the same mixer generates signatures that can be statistically linked. Another process is metadata leakage. Modern image uploads often strip visible data, but EXI and location traces remain if users are careless or services do not sanitize files. Investigators rely on that oversight. Finally, decentralized hosting and mirror networks complicate takedown because content disperses across jurisdictions and transient hosts. Each of these processes is not a how-to, but a forensic note. Small technical choices leave traces investigators can and do follow. We must name the people who populated these stories. Secondary characters included Officer David Ruiz, lead investigator on the Atlas case, who coordinated multi-jurisdictional subpoenas; Malik Chin, the blockchain analyst who traced payment flows; Jenna Morales, former Atlas moderator turned witness; Hannah Park and Nora Finch, moderators on Red Orchard with competing philosophies; Thomas Gruber, the whistleblower vendor; Leo Alvarez, the virulent member who escalated harassment; Dr. Aisha Khan, who testified in the homicide-related fraud case; and reporter Leo Martin, who first published a leak that connected Atlas and Red Orchard. Each played a role that moves beyond labels. David Ruiz organized evidence collection with meticulous forms and late-night calls. Malik performed statistical analysis to show probabilities that payments were linked to violent acts. Jenna provided access to private logs that showed how moderation decisions were made. Hannah testified about the emotional toll of protecting a community that then betrayed its members. Toma supplied vendor records that became keys in investigation. Their interactions read like a winding trial where technical proofs met human testimony. Dialogue appears repeatedly. An officer saying, "We need warrant for the mirror servers." A judge asking, "Did you attempt to contact the host?" A vendor claiming, "I sold data but never intended harm." A moderator pleading, "We thought we were helping." Each exchange widened the moral frame. There are clear moments of tension that define this story. Moment 1, the raid notification at dawn when agents in 3 countries synchronized seizures. The sound of doors hitting frames, the smell of coffee abandoned on desks, and the whir of confiscated hard drives created a tableau that investigators later described as cathartic and terrifying. Moment 2, the court hearing where a vendor demanded anonymity and a victim took the stand, tissues rustling and the public gallery muffled their breathing. The presiding judge paused and said, "We are dealing with lives, not hypotheticals." Moment 3, a doxing leak that traveled to a small town and led to a canceled wedding. The phone calls, the texts, the quiet strain in family conversations revealed harm that extended beyond headlines. Moment 4, an admin log revealed a moderator who suppressed reports to protect a friend, and the sense of betrayal reverberated through the community. Each of these moments included roughly the same cadence: accusation, evidence, denial, and then the slow, grinding movement of institutions attempting to respond. Their length and sensory texture mattered. They were not abstract events, but embodied scenes. The legal and social consequences unfolded unevenly. Atlas's takedown operation hinged on coordination. Officer Ruiz obtained warrants for servers in 3 countries. Partners executed seizures, and prosecutors used chain of custody protocols to preserve evidence. The operation exposed one of the technical weaknesses of illicit markets. They assume perpetual access to anonymous infrastructure. When access was interrupted, transaction flows left artifacts. The main defendant, Marek Holden, pleaded guilty to charges related to facilitating illegal sales and money laundering. He received a prison sentence and his assets were confiscated in a settlement. But the aftermath included unintended harm. Some small vendors who sold non-criminal goods have accounts frozen and lost earnings. A community of legitimate users lost a communications channel for controversial but lawful speech. The story raised questions about proportionality and about the correct balance between enforcement and collateral harm. The Red Orchard prosecutions produced civil settlements and an apology from one of the moderators who had remained too long. In the WorkLink case, the manager paid fines and the company restructured its vetting procedures. Boards like Purview faced platform-level bans and intermittent moderation, but the core problem remained. Radicalized individuals migrated to other platforms. The technical response included better automated detection of harassment patterns and improved reporting flows. The social response included hotlines for targeted individuals and a small number of de-radicalization programs funded by municipal grants. In the months after the major operations, the community reactions were revealing. 1 month after Atlas fell, a splinter market called Meridian emerged, using decentralized storage but with an overt focus on content moderation. The founders advertised stricter rules and PGP-hardened vetting. Some former Atlas users migrated, but many did not trust a repeat of previous failures. The immediate effect was disorientation and a spike in phishing as opportunists exploited confusion. 3 months after the takedown, prosecutors in the main jurisdiction published a redacted evidence package and hosted a press conference. The authorities emphasized collaboration and recommended that exchanges improve Know Your Customer practices without disclosing specifics that could be exploited. Civil society groups convened panels on privacy and safety. 6 months after the operation, a nonprofit coalition formed to offer support to people harmed by online harassment. The coalition combined legal aid, digital hygiene training, and emergency funds for those who lost jobs due to doxing. The epilogue is complicated. Some actors faced accountability, some platforms implemented reforms, and
some harm persisted. The 1-month window showed immediate disruption. The 3-month window showed institutional responses and new policies. And the 6-month window showed the emergence of support structures and long-term debates about regulation. These phases mattered because responses that arrive slowly rarely address the same harms in the same way. Throughout this investigation, the ethical questions were constant. Does privacy protect wrongdoing, or is it a civil liberty that must be guarded? When platforms become proxies for harm, who bears responsibility? The code, the founder, the moderators, or the law? We do not offer simple solutions, but we can insist on accountability, better forensic practices, and real support for victims. Technical literacy matters. If you post an image, consider metadata. If you join a closed board, watch for escalation. If you use cryptocurrency, understand that mixing is not magical invisibility. These are practical cautions, not a how-to for evasion. If this reporting raised questions, please write "What shocked me" and say which part struck you most. We read comments and they guide our next steps. If you want more reporting like this, subscribe to the channel. This investigation is part journalism, part public service, and your engagement helps fund the follow-up documents and legal research we keep behind us. At the end of this case, the image that stays is not a server rack or a payment flow, but the faces of people who lost stability because an online system rewarded evasion. They were real people with jobs, families, and plans. The final line is simple: technology amplifies human choices. When those choices favor growth over governance, the consequences are rarely confined to screens. Thank you for following this investigation. We will continue to trace the next threads and return with updates as new evidence emerges.